Hey everybody, old school nerd here. Um, some of you know where I live. Some of you know a little bit about me. Um, I'm 45 years old. Um, and I'm a single dad with three daughters, 20, 16, and 10. Um, and I'm divorced. And I'm seeing someone who is an amazing person, and she loves my kids, and my kids love her, and it's probably one of the best parts of my life right now. I get to share a lot of it with y'all. Um, I wasn't going to say anything. I've been watching a lot of stuff on TV and Twitter, and the internet is exploding, and I see all these people that I respect commenting on it. And I wasn't going to originally because I thought, let's be honest, I'm a Caucasian male. I live in the deep South. My family heritage is of the deep South. And as, a white male in the deep South, I know that I fit in a category that, according to tribalism and social justice and the world as we see it, my opinion is sometimes not warranted. It's not desired. It's not wanting to be heard or seen or even acknowledged. And that's fine. I can accept that. But I'm going to leave the comments on this video open for anyone to comment on what I'm about to say. I just ask two things. Number one, I'm making this video for my children, okay? So that they one day will see this and they will see the person that their father is. I'm also making this video because although I will not interject myself on Twitter or on other social media, this is posted on my channel. And those who know me, those who want to know, can hear about it. So that my first thought is respect. My statements are my own. They are not coming from anywhere else. They're just coming from how I feel. So number one, realize that I don't have an agenda outside of my home and my daughters and my life. And number two, if you have negative comments to say about me personally, or you want to give some kind of sermon on the mount about how I have no voice in this because of my race or my gender or my orientation or creed or whatever, at least see the whole video before you open your mouth or type your feelings. Because just if you look at the title, or you just listen to this part and you just dismiss me, then you're not doing yourself a service, you're not doing me a service, and you're not doing the world a service. Because last time I checked, we should take the time to listen to each other's thoughts and ideas and how we feel, and then base our perception of that person based upon that, not based upon what somebody else feels or what somebody else thinks, because of it's a stereotype. The events of the last week have been haunting for me, mainly because at 45 years old, it's all too familiar. This ain't nothing new, man. Unfortunately, this has become too common of a place. I can't comment, I can't relate, I can't understand, I can't know, and I'm not even going to pretend to know how the people, the family and close friends of the gentleman who died in Minneapolis feel. I don't know what that's like. I know what it was like when my dad was killed by a drunk driver. I felt like I was robbed of my father. I felt like my children were robbed of their grandfather and even knowing him. I know what that feels like. So I'm not going to pretend I know what they're feeling. But I'm going to talk to you real quick about 3 instances of racism that I've seen in my life. Now, I said racism that I've experienced in my life. I'm not saying that I've experienced racism. I'm not saying that. I wouldn't dare to say that, but I've observed it, and it has affected me, and it's affected the way I look at people. It's affected the way that I raise my children, and it all goes back to when I was a little kid. I want you to imagine with me growing up in the late 70s and early 80s in South Louisiana. Okay? We're talking 30, 40 years ago. Okay? Different world. Now, the civil rights movement is not something that occurred in the 60s. Anyone who tells you that is a lie. The civil rights movement began the day that slaves were released, or the Emancipation Proclamation began in the 1860s, and it has been a long, hard fight to get where we are now. Jim Crow laws, segregation, desegregation. You go through the list of the stuff that actually has happened. Not on what some stupid newscast says, and not on what some blog or Twitter post says. No. Go back and look at the real history. Do some research. See the plight of America. Not just black, not just Asian, not just Hispanic, not just Native American, but also to the people who are Caucasian, Anglo-American, European American, who tried their best to make it better, were targeted as well. Not to the same extent. I'm just saying, for those of us who believe that everyone should be created equal, that everyone should have equal opportunity in our life, that everyone should be looked upon by the goodness of their heart, or as Dr. King said, and I read it, I was not alive when it happened, when he said that we should judge a man, and when he said man, by the way, it's the 60s, so he's going to say man, but he's saying all peoples. That we should judge them by the character of their person, not by the color of their skin. And that is a good start. But I think that he, in the world he lived in the 60s, in the South, that's what he was facing at the time. But now we look at it like this, and we should also say by a person's character, not by their gender, not by their race, not by the color of their skin, not by their creed, not by their beliefs. We should judge them by their character. That's something I believed in from even as a small child, because something happened to me when I was really young, and this was my first interaction with racism. She's been gone since 1998. So 22 years, I think it's safe to say I can actually say this out loud, and I really don't care what anyone thinks in my family. My grandmother was a racist. I'm telling you right now, my grandmother was a racist. Not my mom's mother. My dad's mother was from a predominant family. Not going to say the name, because locally that family name has a history of issues with race lately. But she was a member of that family. And I remember as a little child in the early 80s going to my grandparents' house and being ridiculed and looked at like a piece of trash because my mom left my dad, because my dad was an abusive husband and a womanizer and just a shitty person overall. But because he could do no wrong in her eyes, my mom was shunned. So anytime that I would come to visit, she wouldn't even talk to me. So already I figured out my grandmother was an asshole. But she was my grandmother, so you respect your elders. I was taught to respect my elder. So I respected my grandmother. I was scared to death of her, but, you know, I respected her because she was my elder. Until I was 9. And then I realized the person that my grandmother was. I remember being in my grandparents' living room, and there was the middle of the afternoon. I come in from playing outside. We had lunch, and I was sitting on the living room floor, and there was a TV show playing, and the cartoons were playing, and there was G.I. Joe and Transformers and stuff, and Grandma was letting me watch those things because those were fine. When I was growing up, it was G.I. Joe, Transformers, He-Man, She-Ra, Scooby-Doo. We all know those things. I'm an old guy. That's what there was. But a particular show came on after Transformers because it went from the early afternoon until 4 o'clock. And at 4 o'clock, Transformers played. And then at 4:30, there was a show that would come on before the 5 o'clock news. And this is where my world changed. This is where my world changed. This is where an understanding of the world. I was 9 years old, and I lived in kind of a little homogenous little bubble with my family. Good Times came on. The show Good Times. And if you've never seen the show Good Times, you should really go back and watch it. Because in the 80s, it was very avant-garde. To say that there was a show, for people that think, oh, the Cosby Show showed Black America, blah, 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 that's bullshit. Good Times showed the hilarity of the ghetto, the Chicago ghetto, and life as an African American. But it did some little things. It made fun of it. It made fun of the culture, the stereotypes, and it was comedy, but there were moments in there where reality, they would slip it in. So you'd see what it was really like to be there. Now, as a child, 9 years old, white, growing up in the South, I didn't understand it. But what did occur to me and what I did understand was my grandmother's reaction to it. Now, at the time, my grandmother was in her late 70s, in her middle 70s. And when the show would come on, it'd have that show, that song, that classic, just soul sounding show with and you'd see the swirling font of the word Good Times, and you'd have that music, that funk, a little Motown style music, that soul of that music. And you'd see the views of the project high rises and the elevated train of Chicago. You'd see all that. And my grandmother's reaction every time was one of anger and disdain and disgust. And I didn't understand. But I do remember all the things she said. I remember one thing she used to say: I can't believe they got their own show. And then she would change the channel. And even at 9, I remembered that was kind of a mean thing to say. And I just thought it was mean. And then at that point, her disdain in her voice and the vitriol nastiness in her voice about a TV show, about another color of person, another race of person, people that lived in another place with other situations and other life experiences, caused such a visceral hatred in her voice. And I recognized that disdain, and it was the same disdain she would talk to me when she would see me. She'd roll her eyes and because she didn't like me, because she didn't like my mom. And that stuck with me. I went to a private school as a kid. And in my private school, yeah, we had 4 African-American students in my high school. And I remember Michael. Michael was the drummer at the local full gospel Pentecostal African-American church, and it's called True Vine Ministries. And I remember Michael would talk about his church, and I'd be like, man, your church sounds awesome, because we were going to a Christian school. So my church growing up was very, very, fundamental, whatever. But then he would tell me about their song service, and I'd be like, man, I love the drums. And I just thought it was so cool the way he got to play drums in his church versus the way we had to play drums in our church. And I thought it sucked. But Michael was the only person that I had spent time with as a kid that was black. But to me, Michael was no different than my friend Michael, who was white. It didn't register to me. As I got older, I graduated high school and I went to UL, and that was a complete culture shock. I was really young too. I was like only 16 years old when I graduated high school. So the to go from the May and then go to UL as a 16-year-old just turning into 17 in that semester was too much. The social explosion of different cultures and races and genders, and it was a lot for me. And it was like an explosion against me, and I really didn't react well. And it wasn't because I didn't like being around black people or whatever. It was just so many different ideas that I was too young. I wasn't old enough to deal with that properly. So then I joined the Army. I needed to grow up a lot. I needed to see a sense of. I volunteered for the Army, for the National Guard, and I went to basic training in Fort Sill, and it blew me away, the cultural gumbo that was my platoon that I was in, because there was the number one PT physical training monster that would max out push-ups, pull-ups, running, and sit-ups was a Vietnamese guy named, of course, his name was Nguyen. Sorry, it's a common name, you know. It's like it's like saying the word Broussard, you know, in Lafayette. It's a pretty common name, but I remember his name was Van Nguyen, and he was 4'11", and he could outwork us. He said, "PT good for me, PT good for you," and I thought it was great. My battle buddy was a homogeneously extremely white, red-haired guy, blonde-haired guy from Oklahoma. His last name was Custer, and he was actually the great grandnephew of General Custer. And I thought it was crazy. And then the guy next to me was a Mormon. McDaniel was a Mormon right next to me. And that was the happiest, calmest person I've ever met in my life. And the person to my left was a guy from South Central LA. Okay. And his name was Gonzalez. And he was a big, burly guy, big, huge guy. And he was like, I joined the Army because I wanted to get out of my neighborhood because things were so bad. You know, it was either this or I was gonna, or my cousin was gonna make me jump in, and I didn't know what jumping in was. I had no idea what that was, and he told me about it, and I was just shocked. And spending time with people, we had guys that were from Harlem. We had a guy that was from South Houston, and from Pasadena. You know, he barely spoke English, but we all joined the Army because we wanted something different. We're all stuck there, you know, all one. We weren't white or black or brown. We're all, you know, different colors of green. You know, it's just that thing. And I remember spending so much time off base with these guys, and they'd be like, "Hey, you know, stay by us, man. We're gonna take care of you because, you know, we're going." Because where I went to medical training in San Antonio, and I remember Gonzalez would be like, "Now listen, man, we're gonna go see a friend of mine, and we're gonna go see his cousin's house, and you got to stay right by me, man." And I'm like, "Why?" He said, "Because we're going to the Vario." And I was like, "What's that?" He goes, "We're going to my neighborhood." I was like, "Okay," and I didn't understand that because, you know, my grandmother was difficult to be around, but I didn't understand it. And then I remember his name was, his last name his last name was Santiago. I know that sounds so, you know, stereotypical, but I don't know, you know. It's like, you know, it's like being a Smith or a Smith, being white and being a Smith or a Jones, I guess. But Santiago's aunt really took a liking to me because she said that I was so small and I was so skinny at that time. I had no facial hair. And she said that I reminded her of her nephew. And I was like, wow. And she's like, "No, my nephew." And they were from Guatemala. And she said, "My nephew, you look just like my nephew." And I was like, "So where's your nephew?" She goes, "Well, he died. He died in a car accident back in Guatemala." And she would tear up. And she hugged me like, okay. Those were good times in my life because I got to see different people from different parts of the world and understood where they came from, but I had no relevance to it. Um, and in 1992, the Rodney King thing happened. And I remember working for my dad during the summer between semesters. I just got out of the Army and I was working for my dad. And in 1992, the Rodney King thing happened. And the officers who beat him, I remember seeing the video and going, man, those guys are screwed. I mean, I can't believe they just beat that dude up. There was no reason for that. And I remember sitting working for my dad at his business, and there was a guy by the name of Walter. And I learned a lot of what was important to me from Walter. Walter was an African American guy, and he was best friends with my cousin, and they were like my dad's two best technicians. And they both listened to funk, and they both listened to that Motown, but mainly funk. Like, I learned who Parliament Funkadelic was by hanging out with Walter. And Walter would take me to go, he introduced me to Reggie's Soul Food downtown, and he showed me everything. And what really got me is Walter showed me a lot of the local flavor that was Lafayette and South Louisiana. Let me put it like this. If you're from South Louisiana, especially if you're from Baton Rouge, and you know what Plank Road is. Plank Road would be like, Plank Road would be like going just on the other side of the state fairgrounds in Dallas, southeast Dallas, or going to the roughest neighborhoods of like the Ninth Ward of New Orleans. I mean, Plank Road in Baton Rouge was rough. But there was a place that we had to do work at, and I went with Walter one day, and my dad found out that I left and went with Walter, and my dad looked at the route sheet and saw that the Plank Road location was there. And I remember him calling, it was pagers back then. It wasn't cell phones, pagers. He paged Walter, and I remember being in Walter's truck. We pulled over, he was talking to my dad, and all I could hear Walter was saying, like, he goes, listen, I got your son. Your son is okay with me. I'm going to take care of him. He's like my family. He's like my kid. He's like one of my daughters. Nothing's going to happen to him. He's going to be fine because he's with me. And I didn't understand that. And then when we got to Plank Road, we went to the place where we had to do the work. And he said, listen, I know what I told your dad, but I need you to do me a favor. I'm going to go check this out. Stay in the truck. Okay. I was like, I didn't understand. So he went into the building, talked to the lady. He said, look, we're going to get down. We're going to go in the building. I need you to stay in the building. Don't be wandering around out here. Because I said, I thought it'd be okay, but I'm looking around and I'm seeing some guys that I don't know too much about, and they may not like you too much. And I didn't understand that. I didn't understand why I wouldn't be liked. I was just an 18-year-old kid. He goes, there's just a lot of history. There's just a lot of stuff that has nothing to do with you, but it has everything to do with you. And I didn't understand that. I grew up a lot those days. I moved to Dallas and did some work in Dallas after college. And I was doing some work, some technician work. And one of our clients for our company was in an area of South Dallas, just east of Oak Cliff. And if you live in Dallas and you know Oak Cliff, you know what that's like. Oak Cliff is to Dallas what South Central is to LA. Okay? It's not necessarily a poor neighborhoods, poor areas, but it's mostly minority area. And Dallas has its history, just like every major city, of incidents and systems, and just people talk about systemic racism. I don't know if it's a system that does it, but there's just, every time it seems to calm down, we get spikes, and it just seems to never end. So it's like a machine that never stops rolling. And that's what I think of, and I might be wrong. I'm just human. I'm just a human. And I remember that one of the guys was sick, and he couldn't come in. I remember it was Juan. Juan couldn't come in. So they said, hey, we need you to go do this account but I don't know if we can send you. I got to call the owner first. And I didn't understand. And then it was explained to me that the location was a doctor's office, a community medical center, a community clinic, just really close to the State Fair Park in South Dallas. And the owner of the company told me straight up, he's like, look, normally I'd just say, let's just skip it and wait for Juan to come back, because Juan knows the area and you don't. And quite honestly, the owner is worried about you coming out. And I'm like, I don't understand that. I mean, it's 11 o'clock in the morning. Why not? And I learned real quick that in that little area of South Dallas, if you looked like me, you didn't go there during the day, during the night. You didn't go there. But the doctor who owned the clinic still needed the work done. So my job was, they gave me a cell phone and they said, listen, when you get to the clinic, you're going to pull your service truck up in front of the clinic and sit outside the gate. There was a barbed wire fence around the clinic. Okay. And you want you to park there, and someone's going to come get you. And I was blown away by that. I just didn't understand. And when I called the number, the nurse heard me. I said, hey, listen, it's me. I'm with so-and-so. I'm here to do the work. And I was told to wait outside. And she said, yes, sir. You just stay right there. The doctor's going to come out and get you. And I didn't understand that. So he looked like Uncle Phil from The Fresh Prince. He looked like James Avery, the actor. Big, heavy set, bald head, beard, African-American man. But he was wearing that white doctor's coat, that lab coat. Came out with that big smile on his face. He tapped the front of my hood and he walked up to my driver's door and he said, listen, I need you to gather all the stuff you need. And you're going to step out the truck. When you step out the truck, I'm going to shake your hand. I'm going to put my hand on your shoulder. I'm going to walk you to the sidewalk, and I'm going to kind of point around like I'm talking to you about stuff around here and everything. And I'm going to put my arm around you. I'm going to walk you into the clinic. And at that point, you're going to be fine. I didn't understand why. And he said, guys that look like you only come down here when they start in trouble. Or if they're cops and they're starting trouble, and they think that you're somebody from the state that's coming to shut down their community clinic because of how you look. But if I put my hand around you and I give you a hug and I put my arm around you and everything else, they're gonna be like, well, if Doc says he's cool, then he's cool. If Doc likes him, he must be all right. And I'm sorry I have to do that to you, but I just want to make sure you're okay. I want to make sure everybody here respects you. Six months later, that doctor was killed outside of his clinic. He was leaving for the night. He was locking up, and I saw it on the news. And they shot him. Went into his clinic and tried to break into the because they thought he might have drugs in there, but it was a family clinic. It was a community clinic. He didn't have any narcotics in there. He would write prescriptions and he would go out. But sometimes if people couldn't afford the prescriptions at the pharmacy, or they didn't have money for that, he'd have samples and he'd give samples. So I guess word got around, and some people that were desperate for drugs or whatever, they shot him, took his keys, and did that. And I just remember that I was there, and it blew my mind. We move on, got married, had 2 kids, got divorced, got married again. And when I met my ex-wife, she was, she's Hispanic, she's dark complexion. And I remember introducing her to my mom the first time. And my ex went into the house to use the restroom, and the only thing my mom said was not "she's nice," not "she's very sweet," not "I'm happy for you." Her first words were, "She's kind of dark, huh?" And I just remember my sister looked at her with absolute shock, and I looked at my mom and I said, "Look, I don't know where that came from, but I really hope that was a joke. And if it is a joke, don't ever mention that to me again." That was the second experience with racism. The first one was my grandmother. The second one was seeing that so much stuff has happened with police and people in authority that look like me, causing problems in the community, that I had to be protected by a leader in the community. And then that leader in the community was victimized by his own community because of desperation, because of life situations and bad choices, just trying to do something for his community. The third experience with racism was mine. Everyone, and before I say all this, I just want to say, just real quick, everyone is entitled to think and have their own opinion. Everybody can feel any way they want to feel, and they can believe anything they want to believe. And we all make mistakes, and we all have doubts, and we all look at things, and sometimes I look and people say all the time that we haven't come any, racism is worse now than it was back then, and I think that's bullshit, because I remember my grandmother, and I know right now that I don't know a lot of people that were as bad as my grandmother, or some of the stories that Walter would tell me about when he was a kid and cops coming looking for him. So my daughter, here in Lafayette, we have a system called School of Choice, and kids from all over the parish, we have parishes, not counties, all over the parish can register to go to these special schools. And these special schools are open up to all children, all races, all sections of town. It doesn't matter about your income, it doesn't matter about anything, but these schools are designed to focus on different things. There's one for arts, there's one for math, one for sciences. But there was this one little school that I wanted Caroline to go to, because it was a small school, it had small classes, all the teachers I would know, it was really close to the house, and she got in. She was going to be in kindergarten, and I remember that my youngest child, when she got there, the first kid that she made friends with was an African American girl from the other side of town. Adored her, and they were close as could be. And when they got to second grade, this little girl was going to have a sleepover birthday party. She invited Caroline, and she invited one other girl from the school, a few of the little friends from school. And I remember seeing the address where they lived and knowing where that was. And I remember that that address was only 2 streets over from where there was a shooting just 2 nights before. And I remember bringing Caroline out there for the birthday party. It was going to be a sleepover. And I remember going to that section of town and looking around the town and going, I don't know if I want her to stay here. And immediately realizing, you got to be better than that. Because here's the thing. I met the girl's mom. I sat there and talked to the girl's mom. The girl's mom is an amazing mother, an amazing person. And her daughter, who's a friend of my kid, is an amazing kid. It doesn't matter where they live. Caroline's going to spend time with those people. They're sharing their house, their time, their hospitality with her. And my daughter is getting to do things with children from other races, other financial situations, other creeds, other worlds that I didn't get to as a kid. And the best part about it is my little one doesn't see it, doesn't experience it the way that I do, or I did when I was a kid. So in that moment, I felt horrible. I felt like a piece of shit. I immediately thought, you know what? You need to apologize to yourself for not doing that, for even thinking that, and realize how far it's come from your grandmother being pissed off because the show Good Times was on the TV, to your little daughter's best friend is African American, lives in an African American community with a mother who's an amazing mom, and she's an amazing person, and you're lucky that your daughter has friends like that show her that we can be better, we can do better. So if somebody comes up to me and says, oh, there's more racism now than there was before, I'm going to say no. Not in my world, but unfortunately, and this is where it gets hard for me. My daughter asked me, what's going on? Because she doesn't understand. Because all of her friends that are black or Hispanic or Asian, that doesn't matter to her. Why are so many people so angry? Why are so many people getting hurt? Why are so many people getting so angry? And all I can tell her is the truth. That it's been a long time to get where we are, and sometimes the evil of the world rears its ugly head. Here's the problem, and this is where the truth is going to hurt, and this is probably the part of this little conversation that if I can tell you that I know racism in my family, and I've had those thoughts and felt bad about it, and I try to do better every day, that when I tell you some truth now, if this offends you, too bad, because this is how I feel. This is how I see it. This is my opinion. And the last time I checked, there are two things in this world that allow us to do this. We have a society, we have a constitution, we have laws, and we have a faith in whatever God you believe in that says, I can say what I want to say. I can think the way I want to think. I can believe in what I believe, and that's my right. Nobody can take that from me. But there are people out there who don't believe in that. And they'll put their knee on the back of a man's neck for 9 minutes. Whether that's what killed him or not, doesn't matter. That guy took an oath to protect and serve the people of his city. And that oath didn't stop with white people. It didn't stop. It didn't include the words, except for black people. It was for everybody. And he committed a crime because the second that person was put in handcuffs and detained, at that point, he was responsible for the safety and the well-being of that person, because that person was now in his custody, his responsibility. And he betrayed that trust. He betrayed his oath. And he is no better than a serial killer, no better than a pedophile, no better than a rapist, no better than a cold-blooded murderer. Whatever charge they come up with, there's a reason why we have rights and we have laws. Our rights say that we can say and do things and we're protected, that the government can't take those things away from us. So that way we can form up on a street and say whatever we need to say speak up with our voices. But we also have laws that are designed to protect people. And I don't care if you're a white supremacist, a cop, a preacher, a member of Antifa, a member of Black Lives Matter. You have your rights. But those rights need to be available to everybody, whether you like it or not. Because you have the right to say what you need to say and feel the way you feel. You cannot take that away from someone else. Because if you do, you are no better than my grandmother. You are no better than the people that raised her to be that way. There's no reason to do what you do when you do what you do against someone else. I understand that people are very angry, and I don't know what that's like. I don't know how bad it bubbles over. I know we've all been locked away and things have been locked down with all the coronavirus and all this other nonsense and chaos. But I'm going to tell you some truth right now. If you're Antifa and your whole spiel is to be anti-fascist, open up, crack a fucking book and understand what fascism is. Fascism is to take authority against other people and limit their voice and limit what they have the freedom to do and force people to believe and feel the way you feel. That's what being a fascist is. Last time I checked, we don't live in a fascist country because we have our constitution, we have our laws, we're allowed to do those things. And when you go out and you physically attack people because of the way they look or just because they're there, and you wear a mask and you hide yourself in shame and you try to take away the rights of other people, that's being a fascist. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, that's true. Black Lives Matter. You guys, you ladies, you transgendered, all of you, whether you're black, white, Asian, Hispanic, whatever, if you're out there marching for Black Lives Matter, I get it. I applaud it. But it needs to be that. It needs to be the next Salem marches. It needs to be the next rights movement. But don't betray what you're trying to do. If you're worried about Black lives and them being taken away by authoritarian people that are taking the law into their own hands or taking away the rights of other people because they have the authority over them, great. But your message gets lost if it goes from trying to protect the rights and lives of Black people and damaging the community and the lives of anyone else, Black, white, whatever. To the police officers who take the oath and uphold their oath, and they look at all people dispassionately and with patience, and they serve people, thank you. For those of you, unfortunately, whether you're a cop, a preacher, a garbage man, a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher, a fireman, or someone who works at a store somewhere in retail, there's one thing that binds us all. We're all human. And some of us are not good people. We let that hate build up. We let that evil can sometimes take over on us. And we don't let our conscience get a hold of us. And when that happens, evil creeps in, and evil can do things. Have I seen police officers do their job and do their job well and use it with compassion? And yeah. Are there bad apples? Are there bad police officers? Yes. Are there instances where entire police departments and a city's political system is segmented where the rights of people are curtailed because of where they live and their economic situation? Yes. It has existed. It does exist. Here's the problem. This ain't about Trump. This ain't about Pelosi. This ain't about Democrats. This ain't about Republicans. This is about people and money. And when you get these cities where they use all these programs and at the same time they hold the community down, what do you expect? We have to do better. I can't get in my car and drive up to Minneapolis and go stand on a street corner and fight for the rights of all people despite their race, color, gender, and creed. Can't. I have 3 little girls over here I got to take care of. But then I just realized something. I have 3 little girls here. I have a job. I have the people that I encounter every day in my life out in the world. And I can make a difference there. So this has gone on for 45 minutes of me blah, 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 blah. The one thing that can change it is finding compassion. If you see someone hurting, take your time to put yourself in their shoes. Figure out a way to help, even if it's just a little something. You don't know how much this is going to help. The next time you see something and it puts a stereotypical thought in your head about this group or that group, check yourself. Realize that you don't know what it's like to be them. So maybe you should have a little bit more understanding to what's going on. See if you can help. Respect your fellow person. Respect what they go through every day. Because you don't know what it's like. And do your best to make sure that as time goes on, no matter what the TV says, no matter what Twitter says, no matter what all these different groups who are pushing their agendas on you, remember, your little circle of people that you live with, your family, your close friends, those are the people you impact the most. Be an example to them, because I can promise you one thing. My children never met my grandmother. I'm damn sure going to make sure that my legacy is not hers. That when my children will see the world as something that it can be, not what it was, they're going to be told and they're going to be shown the history of their family, the history of the races and all the struggles that everyone has gone through to make this better. It needs to be better. And I'm going to do my best, because I really hope that just like it got better from my grandmother to my mother, and a big step from my mother to me, my step to my children, and then to my grandchildren, that at least in my circle of influence, it stops. It stops. If we could all do that, that's how you stop it. Burning down local businesses and destroying people's lives that have nothing to do with what happened to that man doesn't help. It makes it worse. It holds it down. And we're finding out now that a lot of this nonsense we're seeing out there has nothing to do with that guy dying. It was just a catalyst that made every single angst and hatred portion come out. And everyone's lashing out against other people. There's no reason for it. It needs to stop. The police need to do their job, stop overstepping their bounds, stop hurting people, and uphold the law. Equal blind justice, not how they feel, not their frustration. They need to do their jobs. If they can't, step aside, resign, let someone else step up. Community leaders, talk to your people. Talk to your communities. The videos of a black store owner begging other people to not destroy his business. And by the way, the people destroying his business weren't even black people. They were just criminals attacking a private business that man built on his own. Why? There's no reason for it. We have to do better. I know we can. And if anybody wants to know why I didn't mention Trump, it's very simple. Trump is President Trump is the president of the United States. He was elected to be the president of the United States. He was elected because of the kind of things that he can do. And a lot of people voted for him not because of the person he is, but the fact that he isn't just going to do what everyone has done before. I do not follow what he says. I stay away from it. He has the Twitter mind of a 5-year-old, and sometimes he says stuff that reminds me of people in my past that make me just cringe. Do I like some of the things he's done as a president? Yes, you cannot deny that his efforts to change the criminal justice system that did mandatory minimums and raised an entire prison industry against minorities, which started in the 90s under a different president that everyone seems to think was so awesome, but I'm sorry, that's when that happened. That was good. That was huge. That needed to happen. I don't know why it didn't happen under Obama, but at least he did that. The economy and growing all that, important. If you want to take people out of poverty and out of racial disparity, give them a way to have respect for what they've accomplished. You do that, you change the world. He just shut the hell up and just do those good things, we'd be fine. But he can't open his mouth and do stupid crap. I do know one thing. The Democrats better do a whole lot better than Biden. They better do a whole lot better than what they've done the last 50 years, because the last time I checked, the one thing that I've noticed when I speak to my friends who are in the minorities, like Walter, like Mike, like Andrew, like Percy, all these people that I've met who are African Americans, I've spent time talking to them, and I asked them what it's really like. You know what they all have in common? They're really sick and tired of being told something so that they can vote and then being ignored. So Democrats, you think Trump is a racist? The next time you promise you're going to fix the African American community and they vote for you and you do nothing but make promises and make no changes to help them move forward, they're catching on. They're not just going to believe whatever they're told. They're doing their own research. And they're telling me this is nonsense. Stop making false promises. Trump, shut the hell up. Start being a little bit more compassionate with what you say. I mean, I like some of the stuff you've done as a president. Your policies work. But the crap you say, man, I spend more time trying to explain and make excuses. No, I don't make excuses, actually. Trying to explain what the hell you were saying to my 10-year-old who doesn't understand why the president of the United States says things like that than I do talking about the policies that are helping everybody. Look at that mess we're in. We are in a mess. But you know what? Love your neighbor. Doesn't matter what color they are, gender, or creed. Find someone today. Pay for their gas. Pay for their meal. Pay for their coffee. And tell them, hey, just trying to do something nice and pass it on. And if you do it, no matter who they are, what they look like, or what they're driving or wearing or saying, maybe we can all be a little bit more understanding. I hope that in my lifetime, I never have to make a video like this again. I hope that in my lifetime, we can do better. Because when Rodney King happened and those 4 police officers were acquitted, after everyone seeing what they did, Los Angeles burned. The problem with Minneapolis was when the guy died, they didn't wait for justice to be served. They just jumped. They didn't give a chance for justice to happen. The Minneapolis police chief did the right thing. He fired all 4 of them on the spot. Not just the one who did it, but the ones who didn't stop him. And then at that time, he turned it over to the district attorney and the state attorneys and the FBI, and they did their investigation, and he was arrested. and he's charged. And that's how justice is supposed to work. We should have waited to see if finally, if somebody does something that's evil, it doesn't matter if that guy wasn't white, if he was Asian, if he was Hispanic, if he was black, I'd still want him prosecuted. It doesn't matter if he's white. He took a life away from somebody that was in his charge, under his protection, under his oath of service. And he violated that person's rights. He's going to get what's coming to him, one way or another. This world's not going to let it go by. Love each other. Stop the hate. Stop the violence. Stop hurting your fellow person next to you. Stop hurting your community. It's not helping anything. We get it. My kids see it. We see this time, all this violence didn't really do a whole lot, because this video of this guy kneeling on this other man's neck for 9 minutes, my children saw that. My 16-year-old and 10-year-old saw it with their own eyes on a video. They know how heinous it was. They don't need people burning down housing and stores to know how horrible it was. They cried for that. My 16-year-old drew a picture of the man. Drew a picture of the guy's face, with a halo over his head, with the little inscription on the side that said, sorry that you were, I forgot what she put down, but at the end of her little note on the bottom it said, I hope you have peace. My kids saw that. My kids see it. But they also see the backlash. They don't understand why people are turning against themselves and turning against each other, and I don't know what to tell them. So if you see this video and you have someone who is going out there and doing these things that are not helping anything, they're making it worse, remember, our children are watching. We all know how this goes. We want it to stop. You want it to stop. Let's stop it for our kids that are watching all this happen. It doesn't need to happen like this. Coming up on an hour. I'm going to stop. I've talked too much. It's a beautiful day. Take a deep breath. Love your fellow person next to you. Take care of each other. Take care of those in need. Speak your mind. Speak your faith. Exercise your rights. Respect the law, and know that the law is blind and should be applied to everyone equally, and that's how our lives are supposed to be. I'm going to go now, because I think I've said enough. I've blah-blahed for long enough. I just felt like sharing my heart. Comment below. Let me know what you think. If you have a story that you want to share, I would love to hear from people who've experienced these stories, because you know what? Those stories need to be told so we can all respect it. Love all you guys. I'll talk to you later. It's Old School Nerd. And I'm out.